I didn't want to do it at first, and they'd been after me to do one for about 2 years. And I thought, well, it's going to be...
When Ricky Nelson died in that plane crash in 1985, everyone thought he was broke. His divorce cost $1 million. He owed money everywhere. His kids were about to inherit nothing but debt. Then his brother found a will hidden away. And lawyers discovered something shocking. Record companies had been stealing from him for decades. What happened next turned his 4 children into millionaires. The settlement numbers were so big, the judge couldn't believe it. But there was one son who got nothing. And the reason why will make your jaw drop. Ricky Nelson was born on May 8, 1940, in Teaneck, New Jersey. But he wasn't just any kid. His father, Ozzie Nelson, led a big band. His mother, Harriet Hilliard, was already a movie actress. From the very beginning, Ricky's life was public. By the time he was still in diapers, his family's radio show, The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, was already famous across America. Instead of growing up in quiet suburbia, Ricky grew up in recording studios and sound stages. Family dinners could turn into rehearsals. Vacations sometimes turned into scripts. It was like living inside a permanent spotlight, where everything felt scripted, even the ordinary moments. When Ricky was just 8 years old in 1949, he joined the radio show alongside his brother David. While most boys his age were trading baseball cards or riding bikes, Ricky was memorizing lines and cashing paychecks. He became a star before he even hit double digits. Audiences loved his natural delivery, and by age 10, he was already a household name. But fame came at a price. There were no birthday parties with classmates, no sports teams, just lights, cameras, and responsibility. Ricky didn't really get to be a kid. His playground was a studio. His childhood, in many ways, was sacrificed for the family brand. In 1941, the family moved to Los Angeles and settled into a charming green and white Cape Cod colonial at 1822 Camino Palmero. That house wasn't just a home. It became the face of American television. It appeared in countless episodes of the show, becoming one of the most iconic homes in pop culture. Fans even drove by just to get a glimpse. But inside those walls, it was a business. Scripts were written there. Rehearsals happened in the living room. Ozzie ran the operation like a tight ship, and the kids were part of the crew. Their real lives were inseparable from their on-screen characters. This blend of fiction and reality made the show wildly successful, but it blurred the lines for Ricky. What was real and what was for show? Ricky also struggled with asthma. Badly. It wasn't just a few coughing fits here and there. It kept him home from school, away from friends, and sometimes out of breath just walking across a room. While other kids were playing, Ricky was stuck indoors, reading or listening to music. It made him quiet, thoughtful. He observed more than he spoke. This soft-spoken side of him would become part of his charm later on. On screen, he had a quiet intensity that set him apart. Behind it, though, was a lonely kid trying to breathe and feel normal. When the radio show began in 1944, Ozzie and Harriet hired actors to play their sons. But Ricky and David didn't like that. They wanted to play themselves, and they pushed for it. By 1949, they were starring in the show as themselves. This hadn't really been done before. It was a strange mix of real family life turned into entertainment. And it worked. Ratings climbed, and people became obsessed with the Nelsons. Ricky wasn't just playing a part. He was living it every single day. His real life became public property, and fans ate it up. It was America's first reality family. Decades before, that became a genre. Then came 1957. Ricky was 17 when he performed Fats Domino's I'm Walkin' on the family's TV show. It was electric. Girls across America swooned. The single sold over 1 million copies. Overnight, he became the face of teenage cool. But off-screen, Ricky's life was already spiraling into something far more adult. Parties, girls, fast cars. Fame opened every door, and Ricky walked through all of them. He was charming but wild, polite in interviews but rebellious behind the scenes. He started growing out his sideburns and slicking back his hair, tiny rebellions that annoyed his parents, who still wanted to keep control. Later that year, his first single with Imperial Records, Bebop Baby, made history. It racked up 750,000 advance orders before even hitting stores. When it did, it shot past 1 million copies and cracked the top 5 on both the pop and R&B charts. Ricky wasn't just a teen idol anymore. He was big business. His debut album, Ricky, topped the charts. Suddenly, being young and good-looking wasn't just cute. It was cash. Record labels saw dollar signs in every teenager with a guitar. And Ricky proved it worked. But Ricky was also getting involved in intense relationships, some that would have shocked his fans if they knew. One of them was with Marianne Gaba, who played his girlfriend on TV. Off-screen, things were steamy. Ricky later admitted they would neck for hours, which, in the 1950s, was a scandal waiting to happen. He even gave her a gold ring inscribed, "To Marianne, love Rick." She thought it meant they were serious. He didn't. Ricky was already moving on to other girls, including singer Lori Collins, with whom he started writing music. To the public, he was squeaky clean. But the real Ricky was a teenager in the fast lane, and few knew the truth. All of this made his parents very nervous. Ozzie and Harriet weren't just parents. They were producers, managers, and gatekeepers. They hated how many girlfriends Ricky had. They thought love would ruin his focus. Ozzie especially was strict. Even though Ricky was making $500 a week by his mid-teens, his father held on to the money. Ricky only got a small allowance. His dad didn't want him getting spoiled. That control extended to his personal life, too. Rumors of engagements were crushed. Serious relationships were discouraged. But Ricky, already used to fame and pressure, began to rebel. Secret girlfriends, late-night parties. He was still the face of America's favorite TV family. But behind the scenes, he was slipping further away from their control. Ricky Nelson was only 17 when his debut album hit #1. The album, simply titled Ricky, came out in October 1957. Within weeks, it took over the charts and stayed at the top of the Billboard LP chart for 2 weeks. That made him the youngest artist ever to do so at the time. But this wasn't just a case of a teenager singing catchy tunes. Ricky was already a star on television thanks to The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, one of the most-watched shows in America. Every week, millions saw him not just act, but sing. While other stars like Elvis ruled the radio, Ricky was ruling the living room and the airwaves. Songs like Bebop Baby and Have I Told You Lately That I Love You were already climbing the charts before the album was even out. His success wasn't a coincidence, it was a system. That system had a mastermind behind it, his father, Ozzie Nelson. As producer of their family's TV show, Ozzie saw an opportunity nobody else had. At the end of each episode, Ricky would perform a brand new song. This wasn't just cute, it was genius. 10 million people were tuning in each week. The exposure was massive. When Ricky sang I'm Walkin' on the show in April 1957, the song jumped to #4 on the charts. Its B-side, A Teenager's Romance, climbed even higher, to #2. That kind of impact was unheard of. Ozzie made sure Ricky's songs were baked into the storyline, and he kept a tight grip on where Ricky appeared. He wouldn't even let him go on The Ed Sullivan Show, Why share the spotlight when they could keep all the attention for themselves? Then came Poor Little Fool. In August 1958, it became the first song ever to top Billboard's brand new Hot 100 chart. That alone would have been history, but there's more. The song was written by a 15-year-old girl named Sharon Sheely. Ricky recorded it reluctantly. It wasn't even supposed to be a single, but radio stations loved it. Imperial Records ignored Ricky's protests and released it. It shot to #1, stayed there for 2 weeks, and crossed into country and R&B charts too. That moment cemented Ricky's place in music forever. His estate still earns money from it. The song has been covered many times, but no one else can ever be first on the Hot 100. That's Ricky's title for life. Between 1957 and 1962, Ricky placed 20 songs in the top 40. Only Elvis had more in that time. His very first single with Imperial Records, Bebop Baby, sold over 1 million copies. Before it was even out, it had 750,000 pre-orders. His contract was just as wild. $50,000 guaranteed over 5 years, plus full control over his songs and album artwork. That was unheard of for a teenager. The money from those hits didn't stop flowing either. TV kept pushing his records. By 1960, the Ricky Nelson International Fan Club had 9,000 chapters worldwide. Ricky wasn't just rich, he was everywhere. In 1959, he proved he could act too. He starred in Rio Bravo with John Wayne and Dean Martin. His role as Colorado Ryan earned him a Golden Globe nomination for Most Promising Newcomer. But while his acting was praised, something else was on display. His spending. Ricky lived big. Custom suits, luxury cars, VIP clubs. He was in deep with Hollywood's elite. He was said to have a $5,000 monthly allowance, which would be around $50,000 today. That role boosted his career, but it also revealed his taste for the high life. Fame wasn't just bringing in money, it was changing him. Ironically, 1961 also gave him one of his biggest hits, Travelin' Man. Sam Cooke turned it down first. He didn't think it fit him. Ricky took a chance on it and proved everyone wrong. The song hit #1 in April and sold over 1 million copies within weeks. The B-side, Hello Mary Lou, became a hit too. 2 massive hits on one record. Ricky had an ear for songs others missed. It was one of the last big wins before everything changed. Behind the scenes, he was getting frustrated. The older session musicians on his albums didn't respect rock and roll. Some refused to play the way he wanted. One even told him, "Kid, this ain't music." So Ricky fired them. He built his own band, young musicians who believed in the sound he was chasing. It cost him a lot: salaries, gear, travel. But it gave him control. One of those new band members was James Burton, who'd go on to become a legend in his own right. This wasn't just about sound. It was about respect. Ricky was done being treated like a puppet, but no amount of control could stop what came next. In 1964, the Beatles hit America like a tidal wave. Their appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show in February changed everything. By April, they held all top 5 spots on the Billboard chart. Elvis struggled. So did everyone else. Ricky was no exception. His song For You that year barely made it into the top 40. The magic was slipping. The British invasion didn't just bring new music, it reset the rules. Rick Nelson was already a music star when he met 16-year-old Chris Harmon on Christmas Day, 1961. He was 21. She was the daughter of football legend Tom Harmon and actress Elise Knox, and the sister of future TV star Mark Harmon. On paper, they looked like a Hollywood dream couple, famous, attractive, and raised in the spotlight. But that dream turned into a long, painful nightmare. From the very beginning, Rick was under pressure. His father, Ozzie, controlled his finances. Chris, raised in luxury, wanted a lavish lifestyle. Rick tried to keep up, but the spending never stopped. Homes, cars, designer clothes, and exotic vacations drained his bank account year after year. By the late 1970s, Rick was broke. The fairy tale had collapsed. When they got married on April 20th, 1963, it wasn't exactly romantic. It was a shotgun wedding. Chris was already pregnant, and her Catholic parents insisted on a fast ceremony. Rick, who wasn't Catholic, had to sign a formal pledge promising to raise their kids in the faith. It wasn't his choice. It was a demand. He had to take Catholic classes and go through the motions just to keep the peace. The wedding was supposed to be a celebration, but behind the scenes, it was about control, pressure, and putting on a show for the world. That pressure never let up. Strangely, Rick's parents loved Chris. They'd rejected every other girl he dated, but not her. They were thrilled to link the Nelson and Harmon families. Chris had the right image, classy, connected, and from Hollywood royalty. It seemed like a perfect match, but that illusion faded fast. Rick, who had always followed his father's tight financial rules, now had a wife who wanted everything money could buy. They didn't budget, they just spent. When Rick's career cooled off in the mid-1970s, the bills didn't. Chris wanted him home more. Rick had to keep touring. He was stretched thin, emotionally and financially. The marriage that once impressed everyone ended with a $1 million legal bill. After their wedding, Chris even joined Rick on the adventures of Ozzie and Harriet. She played herself on the show and brought in her own income. But 2 paychecks just meant more spending. Neither of them knew how to save. They were surrounded by agents, assistants, and accountants, but no one stopped the bleeding. Rick, who once followed his father's strict money rules, was now throwing it all away just to keep up with the lifestyle. Chris, feeling trapped in a fake TV world and a crumbling marriage, started pulling away. By then, they were too far gone. The Hollywood dream turned into a slow-motion financial collapse. In 1965, Rick and Chris made a movie together called Love and Kisses. His father directed it. The story was about 2 teenagers who elope and struggle to live with the groom's parents. The plot was lighthearted, but the reality was dark. Their real-life problems were already bleeding into their work. Critics thought it was inspired casting, but no one realized how close the movie hit to home. Rick played a high schooler even though he was 25. Chris's performance got little praise. Behind the scenes, their marriage was falling apart. Ozzie used the film to play out private issues, putting personal drama on screen in a way that felt more painful than entertaining. It was awkward, uncomfortable, and prophetic. By 1969, Rick was desperate to escape the past. He formed the Stone Canyon Band to reinvent himself, blending country and rock before it was trendy. He recruited Randy Meisner, who would later join the Eagles. The band had potential, but the timing was rough. Rick went from headlining big venues to performing in tiny clubs for little money. Meisner quit, saying he wasn't making any money and felt stuck. The albums Rick Sings Nelson and In Concert were ahead of their time, but didn't sell. Rick was chasing artistic freedom while watching his fame and finances vanish. He was determined to prove himself as a serious musician, even if it cost him everything. And it nearly did. Then came the moment that shattered him. October 15, 1971. Madison Square Garden. A rock and roll spectacular. Rick showed up expecting love, but got booed. He dropped the Y from Ricky, trying to move forward with a new sound. He played Honky Tonk Women. The crowd wanted the old hits. Some said it wasn't about the music. They blamed police action in the crowd. But Rick believed the message was clear. They didn't want the new hymn. He left the stage, humiliated, and watched the rest of the show from backstage. Eventually, he was convinced to come back and play the classics. The audience finally cheered, but the damage was done. That night broke something in him. But out of that disaster came a surprise. In 1972, Rick wrote Garden Party. It was personal. It was raw. It was real. The chorus said it all. You can't please everyone, so you gotta please yourself. That song struck a nerve. It hit number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100 and went gold. For a moment, Rick was back. It was his first top 10 hit in nearly 10 years. Fans who had written him off were now singing along. But it didn't last. Follow-up singles like Palace Guard went nowhere. By 1974, his record label didn't know what to do with him. Albums like Windfall flopped. He started playing amusement parks, took minor TV roles. MCA dropped him. Garden Party became both a victory and a farewell. Rick Nelson was once the golden boy of American pop. But by the mid-1970s, his life was spinning out of control. His marriage to Chris Nelson was falling apart, held together only by appearances. Rick was touring constantly, trying to keep up with their lavish lifestyle, private schools, luxury homes, and a mountain of bills. But the more he worked, the more distant he became. Chris felt abandoned. Rick felt trapped. Their conversations turned into arguments, and the home they'd built became a battlefield. In 1977, after another long tour, Rick came home expecting warmth. Instead, he found himself locked out. Chris had moved all his belongings into a rental house, and when he got there, she was inside, with 2 Los Angeles Rams cheerleaders. Rick was shocked, humiliated. That moment made it clear. There was no going back. Chris claimed she did it for the children, blaming Rick's alleged drug use. Rick's team denied it all. But the damage was done. Their marriage was broken beyond repair. In 1980, they tried again. Rick bought Errol Flynn's old mansion on Mulholland Drive for $750,000. It was meant to be a fresh start, but Chris demanded he quit music and become an actor. Rick couldn't. He was drowning in debt and needed to tour just to survive. The mansion didn't bring peace. It brought more stress. Rumors swirled that it was haunted. The family heard noises, lights flickered, and the money kept bleeding out. The dream home became a nightmare. The divorce turned ugly. Chris accused Rick of drug abuse and being an unfit father. She said their kids would die if she stayed. Rick fired back, accusing her of alcohol abuse and leaving the kids to the staff. The court battle dragged on for 5 years. Over $1 million was spent on lawyers alone. Both sides were emotionally wrecked, and the children were stuck in the middle, watching their parents tear each other apart. By the end of 1982, it was over. The divorce was final. Rick was ordered to pay $4,000 a month in child support. He had joint custody of his 4 kids, who ranged in age from 8 to 19. But he was nearly broke. The legal fight had drained him. He kept touring, night after night, just to keep up with the payments. The emotional weight of it all never lifted. His health declined. His spirit dimmed. And the happiness he once knew seemed gone forever. By 1985, Rick was desperate for a comeback. But there was one problem: he hated flying. Still, he refused to travel by tour bus. So he bought a used plane for $118,000. It was a 1944 Douglas DC-3. It had once belonged to Jerry Lee Lewis. Rick thought it would save him money and give him privacy. But the plane was a mess. The engines were unreliable. Parts failed often. And the band had to push it off the runway more than once. Everyone was afraid of that plane. Guitarist Bobby Neal's wife begged him not to fly on it. Bassist Patrick Woodward had already survived 2 emergency landings. Pianist Andy Chapin didn't want to board either. But Rick ignored all the warnings. He needed the money. He couldn't cancel shows. In September, engine failure forced him to miss Farm Aid, a massive opportunity. On December 31st, 1985, the plane delayed for hours with another mechanical fault. Still, Rick boarded it. They were flying to Dallas for a New Year's Eve show. Somewhere over Texas, smoke filled the cabin. It was so dense that the pilots couldn't see the instruments. The main pilot, Brad Rank, was forced to stick his head out the side window to fly blind. Around 5:14 p.m., the plane crashed in a field just 2 miles from a landing strip near DeKalb. Witnesses said it was trailing black smoke and flying unevenly before it clipped some trees and exploded into flames. The wreckage was scattered over 150 yards. The only survivors were the pilots, who escaped through cockpit windows. Everyone else, 7 people including Rick, died in the inferno. Rick was only 45. His fiancée Helen Blair was with him, along with 5 members of his band and crew: sound technician Donald Clark Russell, pianist Andy Chapin, drummer Rick Intveld, guitarist Bobby Neal, and bassist Patrick Woodward. The crash was so horrific that authorities needed autopsies to identify the remains. The music world was stunned. Nelson had been one of the biggest teen idols of his time, and now, just hours before 1986, he was gone. What came next was even more complicated. Rick's finances were in shambles. He had divorced his wife, Christine Harmon, and had 4 children, Tracy, Gunnar, Matthew, and Sam. He was engaged to Helen Blair, but she was left out of his will. So were his ex-wife and his mother. Even worse, the estate was reportedly about $1 million in debt due to Rick's spending habits, legal fees, and the cost of maintaining the vintage DC-3 that killed him. For a time, people thought Rick had died without a will. His ex-wife claimed she couldn't find one and moved to take over the estate. But Rick's brother, David Nelson, later produced a will dated just 4 months before the crash. That changed everything. The will named only Rick's 4 children as heirs and appointed David as the executor. Still, with so many debts, it wasn't clear if there'd be anything left to inherit. Kristen didn't take it lightly. She tried to claim part of Rick's life insurance despite their divorce. She also challenged David's role as executor in court. The legal fight got ugly fast. Accusations of drug use, bad parenting, and financial recklessness surfaced, some dating back years. More than $1 million had already been spent on the divorce alone. Now, lawyers were circling what was left. Then came an even bigger shock. Rick had another son. His name was Eric Jude Crew, and he was born after a brief affair Rick had with a woman named George Ann Crew in 1980. At first, Rick denied he was the father, but a court-ordered blood test in 1981 proved otherwise. He was ordered to pay $400 a month in child support, which he reportedly stopped paying after a while. In his will, Rick claimed paternity was disputed and left Eric out completely. After Rick died, Georgianne fought for her son's share of the estate, but the court upheld the will. Eric got nothing. At the same time, Helen Blair's parents filed a wrongful death lawsuit. They claimed the plane crash was caused by poor maintenance, and they wanted compensation. The families of the other passengers also joined in. More lawsuits followed. Creditors filed claims. Georgianne pressed for Eric's rights. Kristen continued to fight for insurance money. The estate looked like a sinking ship with too many hands grabbing for scraps. But what everyone missed was that Rick's real fortune wasn't in cash or property. It was in his music. His catalog and royalties, especially from digital formats like streaming, were worth a hidden fortune. The problem was, record labels were quietly stealing it. In 2011, The Nelson estate sued Capitol Records for $100 to $250 million. The lawsuit accused Capitol of hiding unmatched income, money it claimed couldn't be linked to specific artists, and underpaying Rick's estate on digital sales. Capitol had been using deductions that made no sense, like breakage fees meant for physical CDs or vinyl, applied to digital downloads. The estate said it was fraud. Millions were being siphoned off using outdated accounting tricks. Capitol also refused to provide full audit data. The result? Rick's heirs couldn't verify how much they were truly owed. In 2014, the case settled. Capitol agreed to pay an undisclosed amount and promised better transparency moving forward. The legal team called it a landmark victory. But that wasn't the end. In 2020, the estate took on Sony Music. This time, the lawsuit focused on international streaming. Sony was accused of cutting royalties by imposing intercompany fees, meaning Sony's own offices were charging each other and reducing payouts. The result? Up to 68% of some royalties were gone before Rick's estate saw a cent. The settlement was huge, $12.7 million plus a 36% increase in streaming royalties going forward. Rick's kids finally started to see real money from their father's legacy.